1865, spring. The war is over, but peace is a bitter dust in your mouth. You have seen enough of men fighting men. You have seen the South bled dry, its money worthless, its fields fallow. Here in Texas, there is only one thing left in abundance: cattle. Millions of them. Long-horned, slab-sided, tough as mesquite roots, they roam the brush country, their numbers swollen during the 4 years of the American Civil War, where men were away killing each other. They are worth next to nothing here. $1, maybe 2 a head. But you hear the stories, carried on the wind and in the letters from back east. In the North, in Chicago and St. Louis, a nation hungry for beef will pay $40 for a single steer. The problem is the 1,000 miles of raw country that lies between here and there. This is not a new idea, only a new necessity. Before the states ever tore themselves apart, the Tejanos and Mexican vaqueros were already masters of this world. They were the first horsemen of this plain, their ways born from centuries of Spanish tradition on the dry ranges of New Spain. The words you are learning are their words, softened by an Anglo tongue. The riata becomes your lariat. The chaparrais that shield a rider's legs from thorn and cactus become your chaps. The ramuda is the herd of spare horses, the lifeblood of any outfit. The very idea of the rodeo, the roundup, is theirs. You watch them work, men with skin the color of worn leather, their movements with a horse and rope, a kind of fluid magic you can only hope to imitate. They are the origin of this story. You are just stepping into it. The trail boss looks you over. He is not a man for wasted words. His face is a map of sun and wind, his eyes narrowed against a permanent glare. He asks if you can ride. You say you can. He asks if you are afraid of lightning, of drowning, of being trampled, of going for days without seeing another human soul besides the crew. You lie and say you are not. He doesn't care about the lie. He cares that you know what to say. He cares that you are not carrying a fancy gun rigged for show, and that you do smell of the saloon at 10 in the morning. He looks at your hands, checking for the calluses that prove you know what work is. $25 a month in chuck, he says. It is not a negotiation. You'll follow my orders without question. You'll stand your watch, rain or shine. You'll treat the horses better than you treat yourself. The herd comes first, always. You sign on, you stay on till we sell in Kansas. No quitting, no turning back. You give your word. You give it, that is your oath. You join a dozen other men in the bunkhouse, a rough-hewn building that smells of sweat, leather, and stale tobacco smoke. The rules are unwritten, but absolute. No starting a fight you can't finish. No stealing from another man's gear. Keep your bedroll tidy. The man who snores the loudest is fair game for a boot thrown in the dark. You are a mix of men, a reflection of the fractured country. There are other veterans like yourself, boys from Tennessee and Georgia looking for a new start. There is a freedman, a former slave named Moses, whose quiet competence with the horses speaks louder than any words. There are several Tejanos, their Spanish a low murmur around the fire, their skill with a rope a constant humbling lesson. There is a boy, barely 17, his face still soft, trying to hide his fear behind a mask of bravado. You are all equals in only one respect. You are all poor enough to take this job. The trail boss brings out the branding irons. He explains the marks. Your outfit is the Circle C. He shows you the Bar X, the Double T, the Flying U, the brands of the neighboring ranches whose cattle have mixed with yours over the winter. Your first job is the roundup, the rodeo. Spring on the Texas plains is a fleeting, violent affair. The world turns green for a month, bluebonnets and Indian paintbrush carpeting the land, and then the sun begins its merciless siege. This is the time for the great gathering. You ride out at dawn, the air cool and clean, spreading out in a great, sweeping line across miles of country. Your job is to push everything that moves toward a central plane. For days, this is your world. The rhythmic creak of saddle leather, the steady plod of your horse, the distant shape of another rider on the horizon. You comb through thickets of mesquite and chaparral, flushing out cows with their newborn calves, startling rangy bulls who glare at you with ancient malice before crashing away through the brush. The herd grows from a trickle to a stream to a river of cattle, a bawling, shuffling mass of 10,000 animals under a permanent haze of dust. Here, the real work begins. Cutting. The trail boss points out a Bar X steer. It is your job, alongside another hand, to ease your horses into the dense pack, separating that one animal from its fellows without spooking the rest. It is a delicate dance. Your horse, a seasoned cow pony, knows the game better than you do. It leans into the steer, anticipating its every move, turning on a dime, pushing it steadily toward the edge of the herd, where another crew waits to drive it into a separate holding pen. Then comes the branding. The air fills with the shriek of calves separated from their mothers, the thunder of hooves in the dusty corral, and the sharp, acrid smell of burning hair and hide. A calf is roped, its legs pulled taut. You grab the iron from the fire, its end glowing a malevolent orange red. The heat is a solid thing against your face. You press it firmly against the calf's flank. There is a hiss, a plume of smoke, and a desperate bawl from the animal. You hold it for a count of 3, and pull back, leaving the clean, dark mark of the Circle C. You feel a pang of something pity, perhaps, but it is buried under the sheer brutal necessity of the work. An unbranded calf is a stray. A stray belongs to whoever can catch it. The brand is ownership. It is law. The work is relentless, from sunup to sundown. Your muscles scream. The dust coats your throat and grinds in your teeth. You learn to read the cattle, to see the subtle signs of sickness or agitation. You learn which horses in the remuda are steady, which are flighty, which have the stamina for a long chase. The horse breaking is a spectacle of controlled violence. A young bronc, never before saddled, explodes into a frenzy of bucking and twisting, trying to shed the alien weight on its back. The man riding it, one of the veteran Tejano hands, moves with the horse, his body a study in balance and grit, until the animal, exhausted and defeated, finally stands trembling, lathered in sweat, accepting the rider. You see the pain and the fear in the horse's eyes, and you see the grim determination in the man's. It is a necessary cruelty. In these weeks of Roundup, the crew solidifies. You are no longer just a dozen strangers. You are a unit, defined by your shared labor. You learn who to trust in a tight spot, who tells the best stories by the fire, who is quick to anger, and who carries a quiet sadness. You work side by side with men you might have fought against in the war, with men whose skin is a different color, with men who pray to a different god. Out here, on the raw edge of the continent, those distinctions begin to feel thin, meaningless. A man's worth is measured by his ability to do his job. Can he hold his corner? Can he rope a calf? Can he stay in the saddle for 16 hours? Nothing else matters. This shared hardship forges a bond stronger than any you have known before. Your life is pared down to what you can carry on your horse or in the chuck wagon. Your saddle is your most prized possession, more important than your gun. It is a stock saddle, heavy and deep-seated, with a high pommel and cantle designed to keep you secure during sharp turns and sudden stops. The saddle horn is thick and strong, built to withstand the strain of a roped steer. You spend more waking hours in this saddle than you do on your own 2 feet. A poorly fitting one can cripple both you and your horse. Your lariat, your rope, is your primary tool. It is either hemp or rawhide, stiff at first, but with use and applications of tallow, it becomes supple and responsive in your hands. You practice your throws endlessly, building the muscle memory needed to drop a loop over a moving target from a moving horse. Your spurs are not instruments of cruelty. but tools of communication. A light touch of the rowel, signaling a command to your mount. Your chaps, heavy leather leggings worn over your trousers, are your armor against the thorny brush of the south and the biting winds of the north. A wide-brimmed hat keeps the sun off your face and the rain from running down your collar. Your boots have high, slanted heels to keep your feet from slipping through the stirrups. You carry a firearm, but it is not what the dime novels would have you believe. Most often, it's a Winchester rifle in a saddle scabbard, a practical tool for hunting game for the pot, or dealing with a predator, a wolf, a coyote, or the rare mountain lion. A Colt revolver might be on your hip, but it is heavy and cumbersome. Its main purpose is to put a horse out of its misery if it breaks a leg, or to turn a stampeding herd by firing it near the lead steer's face. It is a tool like your rope, not an ornament for dueling. The ramuda is the engine of the drive, a string of 100 or more horses, tended by the wrangler, who is often the youngest member of the crew. Each man has a string of 6 to 8 horses. There is the steady, reliable horse for night guard, the fast, agile horse for cutting, the strong, sturdy horse for the long, slow days on the trail. You rotate mounts twice a day to keep them fresh. You care for your string meticulously, checking for sores, cleaning their hooves, making sure they get their share of grass and water. A man without a horse is not a cowboy. He is just a man on foot, and out here, a man on foot is as good as dead. The heart of the outfit, its moving anchor, is the chuck wagon. Pulled by a team of mules, driven by the cook, a man often too old or too broken for the saddle, but whose authority is second only to the trail boss. He is Cookie, and you do not cross him. The wagon is a masterpiece of compact efficiency. It carries everything: flour, beans, bacon, salt, sugar, and the all-important coffee. A hinged cupboard, the chuck box, folds down to create a workspace. From this mobile kitchen, he produces 3 meals a day, meals that are monotonous but life-sustaining. Breakfast is coffee, sourdough biscuits, and bacon, eaten before the sun is up. Dinner, the midday meal, is more of the same, often eaten in shifts. Supper, at the end of the day, is the main event. A stew, perhaps, with more beans, more bacon, more coffee. The coffee is what fuels you. It is black, strong, and often boiled with the grounds until it is thick enough to float a horseshoe. Water is a constant, gnawing concern. The cook carries a barrel on the side of the wagon, but it is never enough. You drink from streams and rivers, hoping they aren't tainted with alkali, which can sicken both men and cattle. You watch the sky for rain, and when it comes, you curse it for making the ground slick and the work miserable, but you are secretly grateful for the filling of the water holes. In dry stretches, the sight of a windmill or a clean-running creek is a vision of paradise. You learn the taste of water, the subtle differences between sweet water and gypsum water, and you learn to ration it and yourself until the next reliable source. The herd is gathered. 3,000 head of Circle C longhorns, ready for the long trek north to the railhead in Kansas. The trail boss assigns the positions. You are one of 10 hands, a small crew to manage such a vast number of animals. 2 men are chosen for the point. They are the most experienced, riding at the very front of the herd, directing the lead steers and setting the pace. They are the navigators, the scouts, the ones who decide where the herd will go. Behind them, on either side, are the swing riders, 4 of them, who ride at the flanks, keeping the column from spreading out too wide, and at the very back is the drag. This is your position. It is the worst job on the drive, reserved for the newest and least experienced hands. You ride in a perpetual choking cloud of dust, kicked up by 3,000 animals. The dust coats everything. It gets in your eyes, your nose, your mouth. You feel it grinding between your teeth. You smell it, a thick, bovine odor mixed with the dry scent of the earth. Your job is to push the laggards, the slow, the weak, the sick, the stubborn cows with their calves. It is a miserable, thankless task. The pace is agonizingly slow, a constant stop and start. You are always shouting, always waving your hat, always prodding some reluctant beast forward. But you do it. You eat the dust because it is your job. The days fall into a rhythm that is both exhausting and hypnotic. You are in the saddle before sunrise, and you are still there when the sun sets. The herd moves like a slow brown river across the landscape, covering 10, maybe 15 miles on a good day. The sun beats down. The flies are a constant torment, buzzing around your face, crawling on your neck. The landscape is a rolling, endless expanse of grass and sky. You see things with a clarity you have never known. The way a hawk circles on a thermal, the shape of a distant butte, the subtle change in the color of the grass that signals a change in the soil. At night, the herd is bedded down in a suitable spot with good grass and water. This is when the night guard begins. You are split into shifts. For 2 hours, it is your job to ride a slow, wide circle around the sleeping herd. The world is reduced to the sound of your horse's hooves on the soft earth, the jingle of your spurs, and the gentle, collective sigh of 3,000 sleeping animals. It is a time of profound quiet and loneliness. The sky above is a spectacle of impossible, brilliant stars. You sing. You are not singing for entertainment. You are singing to soothe the cattle. A low, monotonous hum, a half-remembered ballad, anything to create a constant, familiar human sound. A sudden noise, the snap of a twig, the cry of a coyote can startle them. A calm, steady voice keeps them settled. Your song is a wall of sound against the vast, dark emptiness of the prairie. In these quiet hours, you feel both infinitesimally small and deeply connected to the great, sleeping world around you. The trail boss rides the line constantly, a silent, watchful presence. He is the brain of the outfit, making all the decisions. He knows this land, knows where to find water, knows how to read the sky. His word is law, and you obey it instantly, because you know your life, and the success of the drive depends on his judgment. The cook is the camp's grumpy sovereign. The wrangler manages the all-important horses. You and the other hands are the muscle, the cogs in this great, moving machine. You do your part. You ride drag, you stand your watch, you drink the bitter coffee, and you push the herd north, 1 mile at a time. The sky has been a strange, bruised purple all afternoon. The air is heavy, still, and unnaturally warm. The cattle are restless. They won't settle, their heads up, sniffing the wind, their lowing taking on a nervous, guttural edge. The older hands exchange grim, knowing glances. You feel it, too, a tightness in your chest, the fine hairs on your arms standing on end. Something is coming. It begins with a whisper of wind that quickly grows to a moan, then a roar. The temperature plummets. Dust devils dance across the plain, and the horizon is swallowed by a wall of blackness. A flicker of lightning, silent and distant at first, then another, closer, followed by a low rumble of thunder that seems to vibrate up from the ground itself. You pull on your slicker, the oiled canvas stiff and smelling of linseed oil. You pull your hat down tight. The trail boss is shouting orders, his voice barely audible over the rising gale. Keep him close. Circle him up. The first drops of rain are huge cold, splattering against the dust like thrown pebbles. Then the heavens open. It is not rain. It is a solid, wind-driven sheet of water that blinds you, stings your face, and soaks you to the bone in seconds. The thunder is no longer a rumble. It is a series of deafening cracks, like the sky itself is splitting apart. And the lightning, it is everywhere. Jagged forks of it strike the ground, illuminating the scene in a series of stark, terrifying flashes. In those brief moments of light, you see a churning chaos, a sea of slick, brown backs, rolling eyes white with terror, and the rain-lashed faces of your fellow riders, A bolt of lightning strikes a cottonwood tree not 100 yards away. The explosion is instantaneous and absolute. The tree vaporizes in a flash of white fire. That is the spark. The collective terror of 3,000 animals ignites. The herd does not just start to run. It explodes. The ground trembles. The sound is not of hooves, but of a single, continuous, earth-shattering roar. A stampede. There is no thought, only instinct. You spur your horse not away, but alongside the terrifying, living avalanche. Your job is not to stop them. Nothing can stop them now but to turn them. You ride into the storm, into the heart of the chaos. Your horse, bred for this, responds, its body straining, its hooves slipping in the mud. You are alongside the head of the stampede, the lead steers running blind, their long horns clashing, their breath coming in ragged snorts. You pull your Colt, the one tool for this specific job, and fire into the air and near the faces of the leaders. The flash and the bang, even against the storm, is enough to make them swerve. The goal is to get the leaders to turn, to force the entire herd into a giant inward-turning spiral, a mill. If you can get them milling, they will eventually run themselves into exhaustion in a tight circle. You and the other riders are phantoms in the storm, appearing and disappearing in the lightning flashes, waving your slickers, firing your pistols, shouting yourselves hoarse. A steer stumbles in the mud, and in an instant it is gone, trampled into the earth by the hundreds behind it. You see a rider go down, his horse losing its footing. 2 others converge, pulling him up onto a saddle, saving him from certain death. Your hands are raw, your reins slick with rain and sweat. Your hat is long gone, ripped away by the wind. The rain is mixed with hail now, ice stones that batter your skull and bruise your shoulders. You are running on pure adrenaline, a primal fear mixed with a desperate sense of duty. For what feels like an eternity, you are a part of the storm, a part of the stampede, a small, fragile human element in a maelstrom of natural fury. Slowly, agonizingly, it begins to work. The head of the column turns. The massive line of cattle begins to bend, folding in on itself. The roar of the stampede lessens, replaced by the confused, frightened bawling of the milling herd. They are circling now, a vast, churning whirlpool of horns and hides. The immediate danger is past. You hold them there until the storm breaks and the first gray light of dawn seeps into the sky. You are soaked, shivering, and utterly spent. The ground is a torn-up quagmire. You take account. You have lost perhaps 100 head. Miraculously, no men were killed. You find your hat a quarter-mile away, trampled into the mud. You sit your horse, the adrenaline draining away, leaving behind an ache that settles deep in your bones. You have survived. That is all. The Red River is not red, but a muddy, sullen brown. It is a line on the map, the border between Texas and Indian Territory. But in reality, it is a formidable, unpredictable barrier. It runs wide and deceptively shallow in places, its bottom a treacherous mix of solid ground and deep pockets of quicksand. The trail boss has been scouting it for a day, looking for the safest place to cross. There is no such thing. There is only a least dangerous place. The chuck wagon goes first. The cook secures everything, lashing down barrels and boxes. He wraps the flour and sugar in layers of canvas, hoping to keep them dry. The mules are urged into the water, their eyes wide with fear. The wagon lurches, the wheels sinking into the soft river bed. The current catches it, pushing it sideways. For a tense minute, it threatens to tip, but the mules find their footing and pull, straining until they drag it up the far bank. A small victory. Now the herd. Getting 3,000 head of cattle to enter a wide, menacing body of water is a challenge of will and nerve. They balk at the water's edge, their fear a palpable thing. You and the other hands form a tight crescent behind them, pushing them forward, shouting, cracking your ropes. A few bold steers are forced into the river, and the rest, by a powerful herd instinct, follow. The water is cold, a shock to your system. Your horse swims, its powerful legs churning, its head held high. You lift your feet out of the stirrups to keep your boots from filling with water. The herd is a bobbing, swimming mass of horns and heads, their bawling echoing across the water. Your job is to ride the flanks, keeping them pointed toward the opposite shore, preventing them from being swept downstream. You see a young calf, separated from its mother, struggling against the current. Its head goes under. It comes up, sputtering, its cries pitiful. Before anyone can reach it, it goes under again and does not reappear. There is no time to mourn. You focus on the living. A steer panics, turning back, swimming against the flow, creating a dangerous eddy of confusion. A Tejano rider, his rope a blur, loops its horns and drags it, fighting and splashing, back in line. The real danger is the river bottom. A horse suddenly sinks to its belly in a patch of quicksand. It screams, a high, terrifying sound of pure animal panic. The rider, a boy from Tennessee, kicks free just as the animal thrashes, its struggles only making it sink faster. He grabs onto the tail of a passing steer, which pulls him, sputtering and cursing, to safety. The horse is lost, its head the last thing to disappear beneath the muddy water. You make it to the other side, soaked and chilled to the bone. The herd scrambles up the muddy bank, disorganized and spooked. The rest of the day is spent regrouping, counting heads and drying out. The cook is in a foul mood. Despite his efforts, a barrel of flour was breached. The bread will be thin for the next few weeks. Your wool blanket in your bedroll is soaked through. It will take days to dry and will smell of mildew for the rest of the trip. You have crossed the Red. Ahead lie the Canadian, the Cimarron, the Arkansas, each with its own character, its own dangers. Each crossing will take a toll in cattle, in supplies, in nerve. The rivers are like gates, and each one demands a price for passage. You pay it, and you move on. North, always north. You are in Kansas now. The land is different. It is flatter, greener, and dotted with homesteads. Sod houses dug into the earth with small patches of tilled ground around them. These are the farmers, the nesters, and they are not happy to see you. They have heard the stories from Texas, stories of a mysterious plague that follows the longhorn herds, a disease that doesn't harm the longhorns themselves, but is fatal to their own domestic cattle. They call it Texas fever. You don't understand the science of it. No one does yet, though some suspect the ticks that infest the longhorns, but you understand the fear. You see it in the eyes of the men who ride out to meet you. They are not cowboys. They are farmers carrying shotguns and squirrel rifles, their faces hard and determined. They tell your trail boss that this is the quarantine line. No Texas cattle are allowed to pass. The trail boss does not argue. He is a practical man. He knows a gunfight would be disastrous, even if you were to win. He just nods, turns the herd, and begins a long, frustrating detour to the west, searching for a gap in the line of armed settlers. It adds days, even weeks, to the drive. It pushes you into drier country, where water and grass are scarce. The mood in the crew turns sour. The cattle grow thin. Tempers fray under the constant, low-grade tension. One evening, a small posse led by a local sheriff rides into your camp. They are polite but firm. They inspect the herd, their eyes lingering on your guns. The sheriff reminds your boss of the law, of the deadlines for reaching the railhead. It is a show of force, a warning. There is no friendly banter. They drink a cup of your coffee, their hands never far from their pistols, and then they ride out, melting back into the twilight. You feel like an invader, an unwelcome carrier of pestilence. The open range you had imagined, a land without borders, is proving to be a fiction. It is already being carved up, claimed, and defended. The threat is not just from farmers. The long, straggling line of the herd is a tempting target for rustlers. They are not the bold outlaws of legend. They are small, desperate men who work at night. You find the signs at dawn, tracks of a few horses, a place where a dozen or so steers have been expertly cut from the edge of the herd and driven away. There is no grand chase. The trail boss knows it is a fool's errand to split the crew and hunt for them in a vast, unknown country. The loss is calculated, accepted with a grim curse, and you push on, tightening the night guard, your senses on a razor's edge. You hear talk of the real outlaws, names whispered around the campfire. The James Younger Gang, hitting banks and trains in Missouri. The Daltons, still years away from their infamous raid on Coffeyville, but already making a name for themselves. You hear stories of posses and lynchings, of vigilante justice meted out under a cottonwood tree. The law is a distant, abstract concept. Out here, justice is what a man, or a group of men, decides it is. You check the loads in your Winchester. You hope you never have to use it on a man. But as you ride through this contested land, where every stranger is a potential threat, you understand that the line between cowboy and gunman, between law and outlaw, is thinner than you ever imagined. The end of the trail is not a grand finish line, but a smell. It is the smell of coal smoke, of civilization, and it reaches you on the wind a day before you see the town. Abilene, or Wichita, or Dodge City. They are all variations on the same theme, a raw, chaotic collision of the prairie and the railroad. After months of open country, the sight of buildings, even rough-hewn, false-fronted ones, is a shock to the system. The first order of business is the cattle. You drive the herd into the vast, sprawling stockyards by the tracks. The air is thick with the smell of manure and the noise of thousands of bawling, frightened animals being sorted, counted, and loaded into cattle cars. Men from the east, buyers in clean shirts and city hats, haggle with your trail boss. You watch as the animals you have lived with, cared for, and cursed for 1,000 miles are prodded up ramps into the dark, swaying cars that will take them to the slaughterhouses of Chicago. There is a strange feeling of emptiness, of anticlimax. The great journey is over. The trail boss pays you off. You stand there with $60 or $70 in your hand, more money than you have seen at one time in your life. Your connection to the Circle C, to the herd, to the other men, is officially severed. You are on your own. The town awaits. The first thing you see is a sign. The carrying of firearms within city limits is strictly prohibited. You and the other hands reluctantly check your revolvers with the town marshal or a designated storekeeper. It is a practical measure. A town full of young men, paid off after months of grueling, dangerous work, and flush with cash and whiskey, is a tinderbox. The legends of high noon duels are mostly smoke. The reality is a clumsy, drunken brawl that spills out of a saloon, or a shot in the back in a dark alley over a card game. The town marshals, men like Wyatt Earp or Bat Masterson, are not noble gunslingers. They are enforcers, hired to keep the peace and protect the town's business interests, which depend on the cowboys' money. You get a bath. You soak in a tub of hot water, scrubbing away months of accumulated dust, sweat, and grime. You buy new clothes, shedding your trail-worn rags for a new shirt and trousers that feel strange and stiff. And then you walk into a saloon. The noise is overwhelming. A tinny piano, the clink of glasses, the murmur and shout of 100 conversations. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of spilled beer and cheap whiskey. You order a drink. The raw alcohol burns a trail down your throat, a fire that loosens the tight knot of exhaustion and tension you've been carrying for months. You drink another. The world begins to soften at the edges. You play cards, faro, or poker, losing a good portion of your pay to professional gamblers who are as much a part of the town's economy as the cattle buyers. You eat a steak, a thick piece of beef from a table with a tablecloth, a luxury so profound it feels decadent. You might visit a dance hall, paying a girl a dime for a dance, the brief, awkward contact a strange and welcome antidote to the all-mill world of the trail. The release is brief and total. You spend your money as if it has no value, because out on the prairie, it truly has none. For 2 or 3 days, you live in a blur of whiskey, cards, and noise. You see fights, brutal and quick, ending with a man on the floor, bleeding from a split lip or a broken nose. It is not heroic. It is ugly and pathetic. Then, one morning, you wake up in a cheap hotel room, your head pounding, your mouth tasting like an old saddle blanket, and your pockets nearly empty. The celebration is over. The town, which seems so full of life and promise, now looks cheap and tawdry in the harsh light of day. You have a choice. You can sign on with another outfit heading back to Texas for another herd, or you can try something new. But the trail has a pull. The memory of the open sky and the quiet of the night guard is already starting to eclipse the headache and the empty wallet. You are a cowboy. It is what you know. You retrieve your gun, you find your saddle, and you look for a trail boss heading south. You ride south, but the world you are returning to is not the one you left. A new invention is scarring the face of the plains, barbed wire. 2 twisted strands of steel with sharp barbs, cheap to produce and easy to string up on wooden posts. For the first time, a man can affordably fence a vast tract of land, claiming it as his own, barring passage to all others. The open range is being sliced into squares. You first encounter it as a shimmering line on the horizon. As you get closer, you see the posts marching in a straight, unnatural line across the rolling hills. A rancher has claimed a creek, a vital water source, and fenced it off. Your trail boss, who has used this route for years, is livid. The old ways, the unwritten laws of the open range where water and grass were for all, are being dismantled strand by strand. This is the beginning of the fence wars. At night, you see riders, their faces masked by bandanas, armed with heavy wire cutters. They ride along the fence lines, snipping the wires, leaving them coiled and useless on the ground. It is a desperate, anonymous rebellion against the closing of the world. The next day, armed guards hired by the big ranching syndicates patrol the fences. There are shootings, ambushes. Men die over a line of wire. The law, once a distant abstraction, now arrives in the form of Texas Rangers and county sheriffs, enforcing the property rights of the men with the money to buy the land and the wire. The nature of your work changes too. The great, long-distance trail drives to Kansas are becoming rarer, choked off by the quarantine lines and the fences. The railroads are pushing deeper into Texas, making the long drives obsolete. The work is now on massive corporate-owned ranches, some of them covering millions of acres. You are no longer a partner in a shared enterprise. You are a wage laborer for an often absent owner in London or Boston. In 1883, on a large outfit in the Texas Panhandle, you and the other hands decide you have had enough. The wages have been cut, the quality of the chuck is poor, and the ranch manager is a tyrant. You go on strike. It is a clumsy, disorganized affair, the first large-scale cowboy strike in history. You demand better pay and fairer treatment. The response from the owners is swift and brutal. They fire all of you. They send for new men, desperate and hungry enough to work for any wage. You are branded as troublemakers, blacklisted. The strike is broken. You learn a hard lesson. The cowboy, the symbol of rugged individualism, is powerless against the organized forces of capital. You drift, looking for work, hearing stories of bigger conflicts. In New Mexico, the Lincoln County War erupts, not over cattle, but over competing mercantile interests, drawing in ranchers, outlaws like Billy the Kid and the U.S. Army. It is a brutal, messy affair that shows how quickly greed and ambition can turn the frontier into a battlefield. Years later, up in Wyoming, you will hear of the Johnson County War, where powerful cattle barons, the members of the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, hire an army of gunmen to invade the county and execute a list of smaller ranchers and settlers they accuse of rustling. It is a war of the rich against the poor, of the established powers against the newcomers. The open range is no longer a place of freedom. It is a territory to be conquered and controlled. The promise of unfenced land moves north. The herds that once went to Kansas are now pointed toward the vast, empty grasslands of Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. The Northern Pacific Railroad has opened up a new market, and the grass up there is rich, a sea of it, belly high to a horse. You follow the work, hiring on for a drive up the Goodnight-loving trail, a tougher, drier route than the Chisholm. You push the herd through the deserts of West Texas and New Mexico, past the mountains of Colorado, and onto the high plains. This is a different world. The winters are harsher, the distances grander. The ranches here are immense, often funded by foreign capital. Their operations run on a scale that dwarfs the smaller outfits in Texas. The economic model of the open range is simple. Buy cattle cheap in the south, drive them north to fatten for free on public land, and sell them for a huge profit. For a few years, it works spectacularly well. Money pours in from the east and from Europe. Everyone wants to be a cattle baron. The ranges become crowded. Too many cattle are pushed onto the land. You take a job as a line rider for a big Wyoming outfit. Your world is a lonely one. You live in a small, remote cabin, a line camp, miles from the main ranch house. Your job is to patrol a section of the ranch's boundary, a boundary that is not a fence, but an imaginary line on a map. You ride the line every day, pushing your outfit's cattle back from the boundary and driving off any strays from neighboring ranches. In the spring, you participate in the great regional roundups, where all the ranches in an area pool their men and resources to sort the commingled herds. The summers are hot and dry. The grass, once so plentiful, is now eaten down to the roots. The streams run low. The land is overgrazed, tired, and brittle. You see the signs of a coming disaster, but the owners, far away in their comfortable offices, demand ever larger herds, ever greater profits. The bubble is stretching thin. You also see the slow, steady encroachment of what they call civilization. Windmills appear on the horizon, their blades spinning in the constant wind, pumping water from deep underground and allowing ranchers to control water sources without relying on rivers. More fences are strung, dividing the great pastures into smaller, more manageable ones. The work is becoming less about long drives and more about maintenance and management. You spend more time digging post holes and stretching wire than you do on the trail. The romance is fading, replaced by the hard, repetitive labor of a farmhand. The myth of the cowboy is being built in the dime novels back east, even as the reality of your life becomes more and more mundane. The summer of 1886 is unusually hot and dry. The grass is scorched brown. The cattle are thin, their ribs showing. The old-timers shake their heads and look to the sky, worried. The winter that follows is the stuff of nightmares. It begins early, with a blizzard in November that blankets the plains in a thick layer of snow. Then a brief, deceptive thaw, which melts the surface of the snow, followed by a sudden, brutal cold snap that freezes it into a solid sheet of ice. The cattle cannot break through the crust to the grass underneath. They begin to starve. You ride out to check on them, your horse struggling through the deep drifts. The wind is a physical force, a relentless, soul-stealing monster that drives the fine, sharp snow into every seam of your clothing. The temperature drops to 20, 30, then 40 below zero. Your breath freezes on your mustache. Your skin burns with the cold. You find the cattle huddled in coulees, and behind rock outcroppings, seeking any shelter from the wind. They are walking skeletons, their heads low, their coats caked with ice. They are too weak to move. They simply stand there, shivering, waiting to die. You try to drive them, to move them to a haystack or a sheltered valley, but they will not be moved. You are helpless. Another blizzard hits in January, even worse than the first. For 3 days, the world disappears into a white, howling vortex. You are trapped in your lime cabin, feeding your horse your own meager rations of flour and oats, burning furniture to stay warm when the firewood runs out. When the storm finally breaks, you ride out into a new world. A world of absolute silence, buried under a deep, uniform blanket of snow. The landscape is smooth, the familiar hills and valleys erased, and then you see them, the carcasses. They are everywhere, piled up in the draws where they sought shelter, frozen solid in the act of standing, their legs stiff, their heads bowed. You see entire herds, hundreds of cattle, dead in a single frozen tableau. Some are drifted over completely, their shapes forming eerie mounds in the snow. The spring thaw, when it comes, reveals the full extent of the devastation. The big die-up, they call it. As the snow melts, it exposes tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of rotting carcasses. The stench of death hangs over the plains for the entire summer. The creeks are choked with bodies, the water poisoned. The great cattle bubble has burst. Ranches that had counted their herds in the tens of thousands find they have only a few hundred survivors. Fortunes built on grass and cattle are wiped out overnight. The English lords and the Boston bankers sell off what's left and go home. The open-range cattle industry, as you knew it, is dead. It was killed not by rustlers or farmers, but by its own hubris and a winter of terrible, indifferent fury. The world after the great winter is a quieter, smaller place. The surviving ranchers, the ones who are not wiped out, know they can never again risk everything on the open range. They buy up land, they string more barbed wire, they build fences around their pastures. They begin to grow hay and other feed crops to sustain their smaller, more manageable herds through the winter. The era of the cowboy is over. The era of the ranch hand has begun. The work is different now. It is a life of fences and feedlots. You ride the fence lines, checking for breaks, replacing posts. You spend your summers cutting and stacking hay. In the winter, you ride out each day with a wagon load of feed, portioning it out to the cattle. The long trail drives are a memory, something the old-timers talk about with a far-off look in their eyes. The skills that once defined you, the ability to read a river, to navigate by the stars, to handle a stampede, are becoming obsolete. Some men cannot make the change. They are creatures of the open range, and they cannot live in a world of squares and fences. They drift away. Some go to the mountains, trying their luck in the gold and silver mines of Colorado or Nevada. Some follow the railroads, taking hard, dangerous jobs laying track across the continent. Some, unable to leave the life of the horse and gun behind, drift to the other side of the law, joining the last of the great outlaw gangs like the Wild Bunch, their brief, violent careers ending in a hail of bullets or a prison cell. A few find work as lawmen or ranch detectives, their skills now used to enforce the very system of property and order that destroyed their old way of life. You stay on. You learn the new work. You are older now. The cold of that last winter settled in your bones and never truly left. You are a ranch hand. The pay is steady, the work predictable. It is a life, but it is not the life. And yet, something survives. It survives in the language. Words from the trail lariat, chaps, ramuda, maverick, corral are now part of the American lexicon. It survives in the techniques. The methods of roping, branding, and handling cattle developed by the vaqueros and perfected on the trail drives are still used on ranches across the West. It survives. most powerfully as a myth. As your own life becomes more settled and routine, you see the myth of the cowboy growing in the magazines and Wild West shows back east. They tell stories of heroic gunslingers, of noble loners riding against the sunset. They get it all wrong. They leave out the dirt, the dust, the crushing boredom, the exhaustion. They leave out the terror of a stampede, the misery of a frozen watch, the slow starvation of a herd in a blizzard. They transform your hard, gritty, often brutal reality into a clean, simple romance of freedom and adventure. And in the end, you understand that this myth is the most enduring legacy of all. The trail drives lasted only 20 years, a brief, intense flicker in the long history of the West. But they created an image, a symbol of independence and rugged self-reliance that captures the imagination of a nation. You lived the reality, and it was 1,000 times harder and more complex than the story they tell. But as you sit on a porch looking out over a fenced pasture, you remember the sight of 3,000 cattle moving like a river across an unfenced world. And you know that you are part of something vast and wild and now forever gone. It survives in the rodeo, a stylized spectacle that distills the essential skills of your life. The riding, the roping into a contest, a performance for a crowd that can never truly understand what it all meant. They cheer for the 8-second ride, but you remember the 16-hour days. They see the glamour, but you remember the grit. You were there. You ate the dust. And that is something the stories can never take away.